Did I just flip on your screens? Can you all hear me?
Can definitely hear you. I do not see the screen. Yeah, now it's loading. Yep, I see your screen.
Perfect. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to say welcome and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for coming to our Economic Empowerment Program. My name is Camille, and I'm a leader with
I think we lost Camille.
I think we did. Let's see. One moment. Camille, you'll have to share your screen again if you can.
Absolutely. Apologize. I don't know why I keep flipping out like that. Let's try this again. Okay. Welcome and good afternoon. This is another economic empowerment program for us. My name is Camille, and I am a leader within the NBMBAA, the Central Florida chapter, as well as our host for the program today for our EES program in partnership with Alight. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Black MBA Central Florida chapter, we cover both Central Florida and North Florida, and our focus for the future is community collaboration and connection. As an organization, we are a 501c3, and we have 5 separate programs. 3 at the very top, MBA Applied, Economic Empowerment, which we're here for today, as well as Professionals Connect, are geared towards adult learning, entrepreneurs, as well as career professionals. Now, down below that, we have our core program, which is focused on young adults, and our Leaders of Tomorrow program, which is focused on our high schoolers. Now, we couldn't do events like this without a wonderful partner. And for this program, our partner is Alight. Wonderful place to work, and they've been wonderful partners for the past few years. We very much appreciate them, and we couldn't do what we do in the community without lovely partners like them. One of my most favorite pieces is actually seeing their values. Agility, leadership, integrity, the growth mindset, high quality, and trust, and just how much people that I work with for these economic empowerment sessions embody those. Please find out more at careers.alight.com. Speaking of engaging in transformational speakers, our speaker for today is Miss Adwowa Afenyi-Annan. And I actually met her during a financial literacy program. And when I tell you that she is engaging and activating, it's really a treat to listen to her speak. She's a graduate of the University of Michigan School of Business with a concentration in both accounting and finance. She's a certified financial planner as well as a certified public accountant with her FINRA Series 766 and 910 licenses. She has over 29 years of financial services experience, including counseling individual clients on their financial planning goals. Currently at Alight, Ms. Adwowa serves as the Director of Financial Education, and in this role, she is responsible for successful delivery of Alight's financial education programs, including on-site seminars, webinars, and online financial education. You'll see she's a fantastic speaker. Now, imagine my surprise when in conversation, we find out that she is all for all things green, right? Not only safeguarding your money, but also she has quite the green thumb and quite the passion for all things that grow. And I have been looking forward to this for quite a while now, because whether you are like me and looking to be a little bit more efficient in your gardening, whether you're talking about the rising cost of food, or whether you're trying to utilize your living space, or maybe this is just a future passion for you, you got to start somewhere. And it's startling just how similar this is to having patience in the financial aspect. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to today's speaker, Ms. Adwowa Afenyi-Annan. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Camille. You made me sound much fancier than I am, but thank you. That was a very kind introduction. And I am looking forward to today's presentation as well. I have lots of passion around finance, but it's rare that in the finance setting I get to get really into the gardening piece of it. And as you said, there are quite a few similarities there. You're not seeing my screen yet, are you?
We are.
Oh, you are seeing my screen. Okay, I can't see my screen, but you can. Okay, that's good. So I think, Camille already explained my background as it relates to financial planning. And as she mentioned, there are quite a few things that are similarities between gardening and financial planning. And I don't really think that hit me until you asked me to do this presentation. And then as I started thinking about it, it does not surprise me at all that someone who would be passionate about financial planning is also a person who would be passionate about growing. They feel like different skills, and in some ways they are, but there's a lot of overlap in what makes one successful is very similar to what makes the other successful. So I think what I really want to accomplish with the session is to get you to thinking about how to grow your own food. It can be extremely overwhelming because there's a lot of information out there from a lot of different sources, and it can get very complex very quickly. But my goal today is really just to help you to figure out a couple things that you can do to get started. And so this is only my third year growing food. I've been growing other stuff for a very long time, but I was always intimidated by food because I thought to myself, if I do this wrong, like someone could get sick. And so I need to make sure I know what the heck I'm doing first. But then before I started my vegetable garden, the first year, a friend from our farmer's market gave me 2 tomato plants, and I put them in a growing container, and I had amazing tomatoes all summer long, and that just started the bug in me. So then I thought, there's a little area over here that I think I want to start a raised bed garden. And so this is where I started. So I started off because I have a tendency to, when I decide I want to do something, I jump all the way in, which you do not have to do because that has its pro and con. But this is where I started, and I started with raised beds because my soil at my house is not good, does not drain well, and that is a very important part of gardening. So I decided to do raised beds instead. And so this is where I started from, and this was in 2024. So this is my third season of growing. And this was, I think I took this yesterday or 2 days ago. So as you can see, it's a little bigger now. And it's really turned into a significant passion for me. And it's allowed me to really, it's a great stress reliever. And it also allows me to grow enough food that I have plenty for myself, my friends, my family, and then whatever extras I also have, I give to the food bank. And so I show this to you just to show you that it's very possible to do this even if you have no background in this. But I'm also showing this to you to tell you that this is not where you need to start. 2 tomatoes in a big container or a grow bag is a great place to start, and see whether you like it before you start jumping into this chaos that I have going on in my backyard. And just to give you some context, this is one of the harvests from, usually I harvest on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And this is one of the Monday harvests. And depending upon the season, this is not an abnormal amount. If I thought about it, I'd taken a picture of all the tomatoes I have in my family room right now, and it's kind of a lot. I will be visiting the food bank tomorrow with some things to drop off. So how do you get started? there's really 6 things that I wanted to make sure we touched on. And these slides are not really earth-shattering. So feel free to type in any questions that you may have in the Q&A box. Happy to, for those of you that can, if you want to just go off of mute and ask me a question, that's completely fine as well. But I just wanted to have a framework, which really is very similar to financial planning. You got to figure out what your goal is. And I always tell people to start with the stuff you're actually going to use. So just because most people say I started with tomatoes does not mean you need to start with tomatoes. If you don't like tomatoes, don't grow them. Grow the stuff that you will be excited to run outside and grab and cook or eat in a salad or whatever that is. And then working with what you have. So trying to then marry the things you like with what conditions those specific plants need and whether you have that. And so that could narrow your list. Say there's 10 things you eat all the time, but only 5 of them meet the conditions that you have. That's how you can narrow down where to start. And then of course, planning. The planner in me always wants to get everything down on paper. And I'll give you a tip that I learned for a tool that I use for planning out my garden. Then, of course, start small. That is, if you don't remember anything else I say, that's one of the things I think is really important because, like I said, every single vegetable has a possibility of needing something different, and that can get really overwhelming. So it's super important to just say, okay, I'm going to grow 3 things in my first year. I'm making that up. 1 thing. See how it goes, and then you'll learn several things that will make you smarter and more efficient the next year. And then staying consistent, just like with financial planning, you've got to regularly water, you've got to weed, you've got to do all of those things. And then prepare for setbacks, which I'll share a couple of mine. I could make a whole presentation on my setbacks, but I'll share at least a couple of them so you have an idea of kind of, even though I call myself a green thumb. I never call myself that, but people call me a green thumb. I have made every mistake possible. So I think that's how I learned. So anyways, I know there's not a ton of people on, but just wanted to get some information from those of you that are on. If you could type in the chat what best describes where you are as a vegetable garden person. So maybe you've never started one, you're just getting started, you have some gardening experience, or you're a guru and you're very comfortable with gardening. Gotcha. Love it. So we've got people who have never done it before, which I think is awesome because hopefully you learned something today that helps you decide to take a step. Just a couple of never gardened before. Okay, 10-4. Okay. I've got all newbies. I love it. So as I mentioned, defining your goals is the first thing. So the suggestion is always to start with a couple of things, 2 or 3 things, a vegetable or herb that you will use often. So what would that be for you? What's something that you eat pretty regularly that you buy at the grocery store on a regular basis? Cabbage, 10-4. Tomatoes, cucumber, squash, okra. Yum. Tomatoes. Okay. Lettuce. Okay. All right. So those are all fairly easy. Kale, tomatoes, onions. I would say pumpkins. Good. Great ideas. So I would say, just to give you some context, I would say the only thing that you mentioned that is a little trickier, I would say, is the onions. It's a lot of that has to do with timing and climate, and it's a very long crop, meaning that you have to plant it and wait. You have to be very patient for a good harvest. Most of the other things that y'all have listed there are things that are reasonably easy to grow. And so that's great. I think that if you're going to get started with any of those things, I think it's very possible for that to work well. And then thinking about your climate, season, and available space. So everything, not everything, let's see. Cabbage and lettuce and kale are more what we call cool season vegetables. And that means that they grow best as it starts to cool off. They do not do as well in the summer heat, although a couple of them you can get some workarounds. Everything else that everyone else mentioned are mostly spring and summer vegetables. So they're the time after your last frost and before your first frost of the year. They're great vegetables for that time. So tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, okra, they all prefer warmer temperatures, and it has to be in a frost-free time of year. So I know a couple of y'all are not in Florida. And so for the Florida folks, you have a much longer growing season. The further north you are, the shorter it is, but still plenty of time to do any of the things that people have mentioned. And someone just commented about vertical farming, which if you are challenged by space, that's a great way to get a lot of vegetables in a small space. And so I have done that as well. I used, I'll put it in the chat. It's called green stalk. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all, given the research that you're and the studying that you're doing. But I have found good success with that. It's a vertical, it has like 5 to 7 layers where you can plant different things in different pockets. So if you are someone who doesn't own a lot of land or doesn't have a lot of space, you can definitely grow a lot in a small space. And things like lettuce, of the things that y'all mentioned, lettuce is a great option to grow vertically because you can have lots of different varieties in a very small space. They don't take up a lot of room. Now, on the flip side of that, tomatoes and pumpkins and cucumbers and squash and okra, those take more space. And so you can grow them in a raised bed, like I showed you in my yard. I've grown all of those things in a raised bed before. Or you can grow them in the ground. But just knowing what your soil is really important in determining whether or not that makes more sense. So, kind of off script, but the benefit of the raised bed or vertical growing is you have more control over things like the soil and the moisture. Whereas if you're growing in the ground, you have to do some things to get the soil to be fertile enough to grow things well. And so generally speaking, you can create the conditions that you want in a raised bed, and that's harder to do in the ground, depending upon where you live. Now, if you have good soil where you live, then it doesn't matter. You could do either one. But as you can see, like there's a lot of parallels between all the things I'm talking about, like choosing your climate, the season, how much space you have. So all those things in terms of figuring out what your goals are is exactly what we do for finances, right? We figure out we choose the vegetables we're actually going to use. We define the goals that matter the most to us. So very similar sort of process in order to get to picking out what you're going to grow. The second thing is working with what you have. So, for example, of the things that y'all are mentioning, tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, okra, almost everything y'all have mentioned are things that need at least 6 hours of direct sun. Now, lettuce is one of the few where that is not the case. You can actually grow lettuce in part sun. And at this time of year, where it's hot pretty much everywhere in the United States, it's really hard to grow lettuce. So part of all the stuff that's going on with this parasite and people are nervous about buying fresh lettuce, it's harder when it's hot to grow lettuce unless you have a way to keep it shaded and good airflow because it doesn't like the heat. It grows much better in, say, October than it will in July in most climates. So someone asked a question about lighting. That's a great question as it relates to whether or not you can get good sunlight, even if you're doing vertical farming? And the short answer is yes, because depending upon when you say vertical farming, that could be like on a patio or a balcony, or that could be outside all the way, like on something that gets direct sun. But if you don't, there's always what's called a grow light, which sounds fancy, but you could get a pretty cheap one on Amazon for a few bucks, or another local store. And that can help you supplement the light if you don't actually have a lot of light in the space where you're growing. So I start a lot of my vegetable seeds inside so that I have more control over that. And I use grow lights to do that. So several of these things I already talked about, but what I want to focus on is the last two, which is time and budget. So time is absolutely critical. One of the most important things about starting a vegetable garden is that you have to be able to have the time to spend to cultivate it. It is not like a let me slap some seeds down here and hope for the best. Like that's just not really that can work for very few crops. And so make sure that you're thinking about how much time you actually have to devote, because most gardeners will tell you that's how they start their day, that's how they end their day, right? A lot of people say, oh, I've got my coffee or my tea, I walk out to my vegetable garden, I check out what's going on, I water, I harvest, I do all of the things that come along with that. So make sure you make the garden the size that you actually have the time to care for it properly, because otherwise you're just going to get frustrated. And if that means you start with two things, start with two things and see how much time it's taking you, see how much you're enjoying it before you scale up. All right, so second question for you. What is the biggest constraint that's keeping you from starting a vegetable garden? Is it time, money, space, or knowledge, or a combination? Time and knowledge, I get that. Space and knowledge. Combination, yep, get that. Yep, good point about the time versus cost savings. So I do think it is, in general, a myth that you're going to save a ton of money by starting your own vegetable garden. That's just my opinion, because there are several things that you have to do to get it started. Now, do I think that within several years, do you end up saving money? Yes, but you probably won't in year one. Because if you have a container, you got to buy the container, you got to buy the soil, you got to buy seeds, which are actually pretty cheap. But there is an upfront cost to it that will not probably pay you back in the season that you start. And so I agree, you have to think about whether or not the cost savings. I would not base whether you decide to grow your own garden on how much you're going to save. I think what attracts people to growing their own food is, one, knowing where their food is coming from, knowing whether there were chemicals used in it. And it's just sort of the gratification of like, oh, I'm cooking squash today, I'm going to go harvest some. It's pretty cool, I'm not going to lie. And so I wouldn't necessarily start with it as a cost savings. Now, do I think you can do that over time? Yes, but not upfront. Yeah, so funding is a big one because it can get expensive, but that's when I would just really think about starting small. Get one green stalk, which they're getting ready to have their sale. They have a sale always around this time of year where you can get them for much cheaper than their normal prices, because they are a little bit pricey. But then you can find little ways. And when you buy seeds, buying seeds at this time of year for next year's growing is also a great idea, because a lot of things will be on sale. Containers will be on sale. So timing it is also really important if your goal is to get started with the least upfront costs. So there are a couple of really good points that came through the chat that I want to mention. So the first one is the healthcare cost savings. That is, I think, one of the main reasons why people choose to start their own gardens, because we in general eat a lot of things that are not good for us, myself included. No matter how big my garden is, I still have my vices that I admit to. But being able to, I remember a friend of mine visiting me, and he said to me that I'd never thought about it this way. He's like, this is basically what you have is medicine. You're basically building your own medicine in your backyard. And I was like, I like that. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it makes sense. And so that's one of the biggest appeals. And then I had a question about how long you can keep seeds. This is one of those things where it depends, because it depends on the type of seed. So some seeds last for a very long time. And then there are others, which, for example, there's a type of seed that's called pelleted seeds. Those don't last as long. They tend to germinate and give you more plants quickly, but they don't store well. And so it kind of depends on what type of seed you're buying. Great questions. So in terms of planning, actually, let me get this link in the chat as well. So obviously I am a planner by trade. And so when I first started off, I literally had like graph paper, and it was when I think back to that, I just want to go back and bless my heart, because that was not going to work for the size of my garden. But then I stumbled upon this really cool app. It's called Grow Veg. I just put the link in the chat. And they have a garden planner where you literally can click on a tomato and put it in a spot, and it tells you how much space you need and all kinds of other information. So I found that to be really helpful, because I'm a very visual person. And so I needed something that was going to show me what it would look like. And it does a pretty good job of that. And I think it's like $35 a year. It's not super expensive for what I think you get for it. And I think you can create up to 5 different plans in there. But I will say one of the things that is important is space planning. So if you say you want to grow a tomato, that's going to take up a lot more room than if you're growing, say, lettuce. And so knowing what grows well together is helpful. Knowing how big your tomato plant could get, so that you make sure you leave it enough room. And so those are kind of the design piece of it is really important. Do I use seeds from my crop to replant versus buying? Yeah, good question. So it depends a lot on what it is. So let me think of an example. So one of my favorite crops to grow is called Roselle hibiscus, which is probably pretty popular in Florida. There's a Jamaican drink that's called sorrel. I don't know if y'all have heard of that before. Okay. Roselle hibiscus is what it's made from. And Roselle hibiscus very easily seeds. And so I save seeds, and I probably have, and I'm not exaggerating, 10,000 seeds of Roselle hibiscus, and that will last me for the rest of my life. Because I have some seeds that are 10 years old, and they germinated this year. Those are really easy, and I never ever buy seeds for those. I never bought them in the beginning. I just bought some Roselle and waited for the seeds to pop, and then I planted them. I have not gotten into things like tomatoes. I'm going to try some peppers. I did do some lettuce this year where I saved the seeds, because I couldn't actually find any of the seeds of this very specific lettuce I wanted to grow. So it depends on the crop. Some of them are really easy to save. Some, it's probably easier and better to just buy them. So we talked about a lot of these things already, which is don't be me and don't go ham to start, because it can get really overwhelming. So just start with 1 or 2 things, right? Most of you listed 1 or 2 things when you first put your notes in the chat, and that's where I would start. Start with something you're passionate about that you know you're going to eat, because like I said, tomatoes are fairly easy to grow, although you need space. But if you don't eat tomatoes, then don't bother. I got a very good question about, is it better to buy vegetable plants already started rather than buying the seeds? And there are pros and cons to that. So the biggest pro of it is it saves you a ton of time, because the process of seed starting is time consuming. But the flip side to that is that starter plants are more expensive. So for example, you could probably buy a package of seeds with, I don't know, 25 seeds in them for tomatoes for $3. But you might be able to buy one starter tomato plant, depending on size, for like $5 to $7 for one. And so if I was just starting out, I would buy starter plants because that would give me a head start, and it would give me some success on the front end. So for all of y'all who said time is a challenge, I think buying starter plants from a local place is a great way to do it. Now, of course, you can go to like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, but I always suggest to people to find out, like, go to your farmer's market or go to a local nursery, because they tend to, I think, have better practices, and their plants are better cared for. So, the person who works at Lowe's may or may not know a thing about gardening, but they're in charge of keeping the plants alive. So you could see how that could go really well or really poorly. And so I tend to buy them from local nurseries, or of course now I grow a bunch of stuff myself, but before I was doing that, I was going to a local nursery to find my starter plants. So as I mentioned, the sort of parallels between investing and financial habits and garden habits are the same. So a person who travels a lot and vegetable gardening don't go super well together, just saying. There are some ways around that. But for example, I'm growing okra and squash and cucumbers, and I'm telling you, like, I went out there this morning and I harvested, and tomorrow morning there will be stuff that's already ready. And so if you've ever eaten okra, you know that you really want it when they're short and tender. If you give it 2 extra days in the garden, you get this massive okra plant fruit that is tough and hard to cut. And so things move very quickly once the plant has the environment that it wants. So you've got to be able to put the time in and be regularly harvesting. And if you start watching videos and stuff, they'll tell you that if you don't regularly harvest, you are signaling to the plant to stop producing fruit. What keeps it producing is the actual harvesting. So if you leave a bunch of cucumbers on your cucumber plant and you don't harvest them, you are signaling to the plant, oh, it's the end of the season, I shouldn't be still fruiting. And it will stop if you don't continuously harvest. So the other thing is the weeds and the pests. Like I said, I'll tell you about some of the stuff that have gone wrong for me. Staying on top of the pests in North Carolina is a lot, because it's hot and it's humid, and some of the stuff I like to grow are things that are harder to grow here in North Carolina because of that. But that's actually none of the stuff you guys mentioned. Everything you guys mentioned is easy to grow because they're things that like heat. So you want to make sure you've got a good plan for watering, and you want to make sure you're checking for weeds and for pests, because the longer things go, the harder it is to control. But if you're out there every morning, spending 15 minutes going through your garden, checking for pests and pulling the small weeds, it's hardly any time at all. If you wait a month, then you have massive weeds and an infestation of a bug that you're trying to get rid of, and then you're fighting against this larger issue. So there, just being able to put the time in and consistency, I think, is a big part of success as it relates to gardening. I just got a question: how do you treat for pests? It depends on the pest. And so what I have found to be the most effective for, I guess, medium-sized pests is that I go out in the morning with a bucket of soapy water, and I literally pick the bugs off of the plant and I dunk them in the soapy water. It's a very simple, easy way to lower your pest population. Now, if it's something really small that is harder to do, and then I use what's called an insecticidal soap, easy to find, where I will sometimes spray. And I tend to focus on things that are organic only, because I want to I don't want a bunch of chemicals on my food. And so a lot of those types of sprays are organic listed, but they kill on contact, some of the pests. So those are a couple things. The picking is the easiest way. And I just put a glove on one hand, bucket in the other, and I just shove them in the soapy water. So I have a routine every morning. The other thing that I will say about watering that I think is really important is that I have my stuff set up on an automatic watering system. Those can seem very intimidating, but they're not. And they save you a lot of time. 'Cause I live in a really hot place, those of you in Florida as well, although I feel like everywhere in the United States is hot this year. And so instead of me having to manually water a bunch of stuff at 7 a.m., the drip irrigation comes on, it cuts itself off after a certain amount of time. And most of the time, then I'm just like spot watering in the afternoon if it's a really hot day, it saves a lot of time. And so I started talking about some of these setbacks because one of the toughest things about vegetable gardening is that there's only so many things that you control. So the things you control, which is actually similar to financial planning, you control the soil, you control the time you spend, you control the water that you're putting on it, but you can't control the rain. And so there are lots of places that have a very rainy season. And although that might sound good, for many vegetables, that's not what they want. They want, like, 2 or 3 good soaks a week, but they don't want constant rain all the time. And, we have rainy seasons here in North Carolina. I'm sure you do in Florida as well. And so that can cause some plants to underperform or overperform. And so really, understanding the things that grow really well in your climate near you is really important. So the way I sorted through that, YouTube is my friend. And I found a guy who is a very similar style to me, who lives in a very similar climate to me, and I basically do what he does. And so he lives in North Carolina but he's one zone, so they have different growing zones. He's one zone warmer than me, but we're close enough that most of the time I can follow his instructions. And I can put him in the chat too. The reason I said he's very similar to me is that he is an engineer by trade, and so he's very step by step. And for me as an accountant, that's just how my brain works. Like, I need you to tell me step 1 through 10. I don't just tell me 1 and 10. I need to know all the little things I need to do in between. And so I find him to be very helpful for that. So I think the other piece of this, right, is that sometimes you can get plants that overgrow their space. So I'll give you an example of that. I'm growing a tomato that's very common for canning, doing canning, and it's called an Amish paste tomato. So I started some, and then I had a few extra plants. But tomatoes take up a lot of space, depending upon the variety that you're growing. Well, so I put this Amish paste tomato in a smaller container because I'd used up all my bigger containers. And then about a month later, it was completely overgrown in that container. And so I was watering it like 3 times a day because it kept drooping. It wasn't getting enough water. It didn't have enough soil. So not only can things underperform, but they can overperform, which is a good problem to have. But then I had to take this big old tomato and put it in a bigger container, and that was not fun. I could have just let the thing die, but I have a hard time with that. So now they're in a much bigger container and happier. Let's see, what else do we have here? So then after all this planning you've been doing, now we're at the harvest part. Right. So if you think you want to make like, for example, this week we did okra and cabbage as our veggie, one of the veggies of the week. We did green beans. I know nobody mentioned that one, but squash and, figuring out cool ways to use your summer squash and zucchini has been really fun. And like I said, we have a lot of tomatoes. And so finding different ways to use all the tomatoes has been fun too. So I think it's just I think if you are just getting started, it's really important to start with just a couple of things and just see how it goes. Pick something off your list, even if it's just one thing. So whoever said cabbage, this is a great time to start some cabbage because that is more of a cool season crop. Same thing with kale. I just started my kale seeds as well. And with lettuce, it depends on the type, but if you're doing like a romaine lettuce, you could start that now too. The cucumbers, you probably could start, you still probably have enough time because whoever said that, I feel like, I don't know what climate you're in. But even if you're in North Carolina or somewhere warmer, you still have time that you could start a cucumber crop, but I would probably buy the plant instead of trying to start the seeds, just to give you a little head start. Pumpkins, it's probably too late for most climates. If you don't get frost until like December, you could probably do most of the stuff that y'all listed as your favorites. So I think 3 things as your key takeaways, which is starting with an intention, figuring out what matters most to you. What do you want to grow? Does that match your climate? And kind of going from there. And then staying consistent. Vegetable gardening, just like if you're trying to build your retirement, you're putting money in out of every check, you've got to be able to put a little bit of time in every day to try to keep your plants happy and give you a good harvest. And then expect the unexpected. I mean, like I said, that tomato, if I knew where that was going to end up, I would have just planted it in a bigger container to begin with, but I didn't know. So then I was like, all right, 2 choices. You kill this thing or you figure out how to move it. So we figured out how to move it. And I think that, like, builds you confidence. It builds you, it builds resilience. It teaches you life skills. That's the thing I feel like I've learned a lot in my garden is how to just be a tougher human. And so I think I've said many times over that people who are farmers are literally the toughest people on the face of the earth because being a farmer, like living on a farm, growing up on a farm, using a farm to make money it's a lot. And I have tons of respect for those people now that I've tried to do a little bit of it myself. All right, I have a few questions. Have I used research or know something using aquaponics? Yep, good question. I have not done aquaponics, but I do know some local folks that are doing that. I have space, and so it's easier for me to just grow them outside. But aquaponics, what's fascinating about that is, one, you don't have to care what the climate is. If you have the indoor space, you can grow all year long. I chose to do that by having a greenhouse so that I can grow stuff off season, but that is a much larger investment of money and time than aquaponics are. So I don't know a lot about it, but I know it's popular and it absolutely can give you good harvest throughout an entire year. All right, my final poll question, and keep the questions coming. I'm happy to answer them. So what do you think you might do given this chat that we've had this evening? What's your next action? Is there anything on here that you feel confident and comfortable that you'll do after the session? I like to pick easy, beginner-friendly plants. It's a good option. Tomatoes, here I come. I love it. I love it. Yeah, and those of y'all in Florida, you can definitely grow some tomatoes because is July your hottest month too? Or is that, yeah, okay. So if July is your hottest month, this is a great time to get some tomatoes in. You'll get them, you'll probably get a decent harvest before you get, because you don't get frost probably till December or January, right? Okay, so yeah, you have time. I'm excited for you. All right. Someone else said they're going to do them all. Prepare a container. Fantastic. Read some of the suggested materials. Also fantastic. And then if you're in Texas, you probably have a decent amount of time left too. It depends on where you are in Texas, but the other thing I would check on is finding out what your gardening zone is. And so if you Google that, it'll give you like it'll give you a number. So for example, I'm in zone 8A. I know lots of parts of Texas are also 8A. So our climates could be similar depending on where you are. So Houston, let's look that up. Okay, you are in 9B or 9A, which is probably similar to, so you said this is Southern Florida, so probably Miami. Are there some people from Miami? It's called. Let's see. It's warmer in Miami. That's 11A. So the higher the number, the warmer the climate. And so you probably don't get a lot of frost at all if you're in Southern Florida. In Northern Florida, I'm sure you do. But yeah, I'm in zone 8A. Houston was 9B or 9A, depending upon where you are in Texas. And so in Houston. And so I think looking up good vegetables for zone 9A is a great place to start. So the first question, do I use spreadsheets to stay organized? I do, because I'm an Excel junkie. And so I have a spreadsheet that's called what to plant and when. And so I put in what it is, when I want to plant it, how many days to harvest, and then it spits out for me when should I start and when will it be ready to harvest. And I use that a lot to just gauge, because some plants, like for example, potatoes, everything that's happening is under the ground. I have no idea, is it ready? Is it not ready? So you have to track the amount of time. And that's how you can tell usually when your plants are ready. Things like tomatoes are easier because you can actually visually see it, but there's lots of crops that are not that way. So I use a combination of that Grow Veg planner that I told you about and Excel. Those are my two main tools. The next question, have you taken some of your harvest to farmers markets or local restaurants to be sold? It's funny that you ask me that because people ask me that all the time, and I have not done that, but I think it's a great way to recoup some of your investment. I have a stronger passion around like selling plants and starter plants because part of my passion is getting other people to get into growing stuff. And so I tend to focus more on the plant part of things. Whereas I think there's lots of farmers in our community, there's probably not enough, but farmers in our community that are more focused on the actual fruit and selling the vegetables and fruit to people. So that isn't as much my passion. I love giving a bunch of stuff away, but it does not help with the wallet. So it's a fair point and a good idea because there's lots of farmers market that are just looking for additional vendors that are growing good food for our community. It's definitely needed. So in closing, I'm happy to stay on if people still have questions, but I want to respect your time because we're getting close to our time together. So many parallels between gardening and financial planning. So I think it's all about consistency. It's about having a plan. It's about being patient. All of those things are similar. So I think if one of you decides to grow one thing, I feel like this was a win. So I hope feel free to reach out and share your stories with me because I would love to hear more about how things go for you. And I'm also happy to share more tips and tricks and things that I've learned along the way. Like I said, I've made every mistake possible. So Did I install a water filtration system? Because some of the water in Central Florida is bad. That is good to know. I did not, but our water in Charlotte is not that bad. It's probably not the best ever, but it's not as much of an issue as it sounds like it might be in some of Central Florida. But I'm sure there are really good systems out there for that, especially if that's a known problem. There's probably some good systems that are out there for that. Other questions on your mind? And oh, you're very welcome. Camille, I'm going to hand it back over to you so you can talk about your next session.
Well, thank you very much, Adwowa. This was did I not tell you this would be a very engaging session? She's a very powerful speaker. So a couple of things that I learned is that I need to reach out to you for some hibiscus seeds so I can make some sorrel.
Oh yeah, please do. I will mail you 1,000.
Oh my goodness, I love the idea. I'm gonna have to borrow the building your own medicine because I don't think I've ever thought of it that way, but that just gives more motivation to start your own garden, right? Things like soapy water, like for removing insects, never in a million years would I have guessed. Just a little soap and water might be able to help a little bit. I'm really excited. I learned a lot here, and I hope our guests did as well. Uh, I'm I'm looking forward to starting these tomatoes. When I tell you that I already know exactly where I'm going to go for, and I'm looking forward to eating some of my own tomatoes in the future.
Yay, I'm excited for you. That's awesome.
Okay, keep the questions coming, please. We'll have a little bit of time at the end if there's anything that you think of. But I wanted to mention, Adwowa mentioned that she goes to YouTube sometimes to find information. For those of you who are local and in Florida, on August 1st, we are actually being invited to go to a permaculture experience. So it's at his private home. However, he has quite a few acres of different vegetables and fruits that you can do in Florida. I don't think he's going to be talking a little much about how you get started, but definitely how you maintain what works specifically for Florida. And he can keep you on a conversation about mangoes for a really long time. So if you'd like to join us, if you would like more information as well, please reach out to us. That's right around the corner, and we're really excited to see what that's like. Hopefully pick up some extra tips and maybe some clippings along the way. He also does a really mean pepper sauce. So we'll do a little bit of trial for that. So that's going to be the Art of Living Well, and it'll be a guided tour. And it's early in the morning because it is hot nowadays. So be prepared to get up early and do a little bit of an easy walk with us through a garden. If you liked what we did today, our economic empowerment series, if you'd like to do business workshops, or even if you would like to give back to your community, please reach out to us. We're always looking for good volunteers. Or if there's other good ideas, if you'd like to hear something like this again, I have no doubt we will know exactly where to look for information. But feel free to reach out to us, connect with us. We want to make you part of the community. We'll be doing quite a few virtual pieces as well as in-person pieces as we end the year and go into 2027. And then finally, a huge thank you to not only our speaker today, but also to Alight. We couldn't do any of this without them. Definitely in those values, hopefully you've seen a little bit of that today: agility, leadership, integrity, that growth mindset, high quality, and trust. Really do appreciate everything that they do and our partnership. So with that, are there any other questions? Let's see. I think we're good. But I have no doubt this was wonderful. And I could think there's a couple of people that I know that, definitely missed out. So this will be recorded. Obviously, we'll share that with this group. But there's nothing like doing it again after we've learned a few things and have different questions. So
yeah. We'd love to do it again. I'm happy to help if I can. I just want more gardeners in the world, so help me out.
More gardeners it is. Here we go. Everything green. Lots of growth and can't argue with that. So with that, have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you, Alight.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye-bye.